it's a catastrophe. It's an absolute catastrophe is really only a justifiable word to describe the medical horrors that have been going on in Palestine and Gaza.
And Assad was also not toppled only because of a military operation that started 2 weeks ago. Of course, we can talk about geopolitical context till tomorrow, and that, of course, plays a huge role. But for some reason, everyone manages to erase the agency of the Syrian people.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. Here are some magic words. The area is a Hamas stronghold. When the Israeli military recites that mystical incantation to itself, every crime and massacre is allowed. The latest is at Kamal Adwan Hospital.
After Israeli forces opened fire on Kamal Adwan Hospital, kids, newborn, are dying out of cold and freezing. End of the news. And this is not breaking news. It's a breaking news that is happening every day for 400 plus days.
The director of the hospital was seized by the Israelis. He had stayed in the hospital as his staff was decimated around him. You recall that months ago, the director of the Al-Quds hospital was kidnapped by the Israelis, and then after months of mistreatment, let go without any charges being filed against him. From Democracy Now!
Palestinian health officials say Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip have killed 38 people and injured 137 others in the past 24 hours. Among the dead are 5 journalists with the Al-Quds Today channel who were killed in an Israeli strike on their broadcasting van near the Al-Ada hospital in the Nuseirat refugee camp. Video of the attack shows a van clearly marked with the word press engulfed in flames. The slain journalists, Fadi Hassouna, Ibrahim al-Sheikh Ali, Mohammed al-Lada, Faisal Abu al-Qumsan, and Ayman al-Jari, who had gone to the Al-Ada hospital with his wife in labor with their first child. The Palestinian Journalist Syndicate reports Israeli attacks since October 2023 have killed more than 190 journalists and media workers across Gaza. Meanwhile, Palestinian doctors say 3 babies have died of hypothermia in recent days as temperatures in Gaza's tent encampments plummet amidst Israel's stifling blockade of food, water, and aid.
Do remember that this is all okay with Biden and almost every member of Congress. It is not okay with all Americans. On the 27th of December, over a dozen gathered near Central Connecticut Hospital in New Britain, Connecticut, to dramatize what is happening to Gaza hospitals.
Today we're here for Gaza, for Palestine. We urge healthcare workers and institutions to live up to their oath and moral obligation to protect the sanctity of life and to demand protection of innocent children and civilians, healthcare institutions and workers. Today we're here for Kamal Adwan Hospital, the last functioning hospital in North Gaza, which has been invaded by the occupying forces. The healthcare workers and their patients, as far as we know, have been arrested and the hospital has been set fire. Healthcare workers have been targeted. Today we say not another child, not another hospital. Yes. Not another child, not another hospital. Not another child, not another hospital. Not another child, not another hospital. Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Jim, why are you here today?
Well, I'm a member of Veterans for Peace, and since 1985, Veterans for Peace has been working for the end of our powerful foreign policy which puts violence before diplomacy. And the Gaza situation is the result of our foreign policy that we've noticed since 1985 when Ronald Reagan was putting pressure on Central America and taking over those countries. I really got involved with the Palestinian situation when Miko Palad wrote a book called The General's Son. Miko grew up in Jerusalem as a Jewish person, and his grandfather was the signer of the Declaration of Independence for Israel. His father was a general in the 1967 war, and Miko was a soldier during that war. And finally, in 1991, I believe it was, his niece was killed by a Hamas bomb. And when his niece was killed, he came back from America where he had settled down, came back to Jerusalem, and during all the publicity about why he, how his family felt about his niece being killed, his sister, who was the mother of the young lady, the 13-year-old that was killed, said it wasn't Hamas that killed me, it was the hate that exists now between the Palestinians and the Jewish people, which is promoted by the Israeli government. So I am here today with a number of Veterans for Peace and the healthcare workers, and I think there's a Jewish Voices for Peace, there's the healthcare people for Palestinian freedom, and we're here to make people aware of the issue and to stand up for peace and nonviolence rather than a violent foreign policy.
I was a healthcare worker before I began taking care of my disabled child. I'm here because I don't agree with the collective punishment of the innocent people, not just the children in Gaza right now. I see images of other disabled children in their wheelchairs, on their crutches, even before they become amputees. And I think every time what would happen if I had to carry my daughter out and she couldn't have her chair anymore. Would we make it out? You know, would I be able to give her her tube feeding? She's fed by a feeding tube, and kids over there have genetic disorders as well, just like my child. They have nothing to do with the occupation. You know, they were just born there, and it's exhausting to see every day. I don't know how people can go about their normal lives. I don't even know how to make Yeah, we're struggling here, but I think everyone should use their privilege just as an American to amplify the voices of those over there who can't speak anymore, and, you know, are going through just atrocities every single day of their lives, and some of them growing up in that and dying in that in such a short time frame. So, free Palestine.
My name's Dr. Jake. I'm a hand surgeon, and I work in New Britain, Connecticut. And I'm here to support the cause to support our healthcare workers in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, in Egypt, and in Jordan.
As a hand surgeon, you must know a heck of a lot about what they're going through over in Palestine and Gaza.
Yeah, it's a catastrophe. It's an absolute catastrophe is really only a justifiable word to describe the medical horrors that have been going on in Palestine and Gaza. These patients can't get basic care, even just basic hygiene to prevent, to prevent disease, for preventable illness. And when they are injured from direct attacks by the Zionist regime, they don't have the capability of being treated. The medical supplies are intentionally being stopped from being brought into Gaza. Even though there are people that want to donate and want to donate supplies, money, and their time to help people, they're being prevented from entering. And so we need to stand up as healthcare workers and say that no matter where it is across the world, that we need to stand up for the healthcare rights of all individuals. Even more importantly, in Gaza, you have a population that's 50% children, and these children are suffering, and that isn't right anywhere on earth.
Do you talk about this with other medical professionals and nurses and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to make my opinion known that what's happening there isn't right. It doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. That there are certain things that are unjustifiable, and you can't use a specific day or action or anything to justify the intentional targeting of children in the head and in the heart. Dr. Mark Perlmutter is a hand surgeon who's been to Gaza, and as have many other trauma surgeons and orthopedic surgeons, and they describe that children are being targeted with bullets lodged in their cranium and in their chest, and they couldn't put their stethoscope more directly on the heart than where the entry wound of that bullet is. And so when I have these conversations with other healthcare workers, I tell them it's not complicated at all. It's very simple.
But we don't see any of the organizations, like AMA or groups like that.
No, the AMA has been a failure to the medical community for many years. They continue to be a failure to the medical community across the world, and especially in America. So that's my opinion on the AMA.
Are there other, smaller organizations that are...
Well, certainly, yeah. There's healthcare workers for Palestine, and there's Doctors Against Genocide. There are some individual doctors and surgeons, medical personnel that perform medical missions in conflict zones and war zones. MSF, Medicine Sans Frontiers, Doctors Without Borders, they have been standing in staunch support for Palestine and for Gaza as well.
Party for Socialism and Liberation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, no, I live
Free
in,
Palestine,
Grand
free
Rapids.
Lebanon, free Syria, free Egypt, free Jordan.
I want to talk about the terrorist lists. This after the U.S. took the Syrian leader of HTS, al-Golani, off the Rewards for Justice list. The U.S. had a $10 million price on his head. How did it happen that the U.S. government has such power? Well, Congress, in its wisdom, gave the Secretary of State the power to declare any foreign organization a terrorist group. It's all up to the Secretary of State. There are no hearings, no trials, no due process. Any American supporting a group on this terrorist list is in a huge amount of trouble. And along with the terrorist list, the State Department has millions in its rewards program, so it gathers information about its targets. It's all arbitrary. It's another weapon for the government. If you want proof, consider that South Africa's Nelson Mandela was on the terrorist list for many years. He was only removed when he was 90, 18 years after he was released from the South African prison. So what? You may think this legislation doesn't affect you. You're not part of some foreign group. But it might soon affect you because of the non-profit killer bill that is sure to come up in the next congressional session. Recall that law would give the Secretary of the Treasury the power to designate any U.S. nonprofit as terrorist supporting. It's obviously modeled after the foreign terrorist law. If your group is put on that list, you're in deep waters. This is all according to plan. Its first target is going to be groups that support Palestinian human rights. The Israeli paper Haaretz explained that this week. See our Palestine-Israel link archive for the link to this Haaretz article. From the conference in Hartford about Palestine several weeks ago, the remarks of keynote speaker Abduallah Ached, who is an organizer and political strategist.
We are passing the mark, and we have passed the mark of 1 year of genocide and decades of occupation. It's important to have organizing spaces like this where we are able to come together as organizers, as visionaries for this movement, and think about what next steps look like in this movement. What it looks like for us here, either in Connecticut, in New York, in Boston, in the United States, and really all across the world, where we should be and how can we build power together. And something that I really want to start off with is by mentioning the two really important paradigms around building power amongst our movement that has been so successful, at least for us in New York, but I am sure for so many communities all across the country as well as all across the world. The first is that we are able to build power as a community better than anyone else through people and not through money. And this showed us something, especially from after October 7th in 2023, when AIPAC and Zionists were ready to put in millions and billions of dollars to suppress us and repress us, but it only resulted in us becoming stronger. And so the one thing that we can recognize from October to now is that people are more valuable than money, something that we should have recognized so long ago. The second, and it comes exactly to my first point, is that repression is actually what is building us power from where we are right now. As much as the Zionists try to repress us through police forces and billions of dollars, it has actually made us so much stronger. So many of us may not have been in spaces like this a year ago, but now are in them because we may have seen one of our brothers or sisters on the front lines getting arrested, or seeing a lawsuit to one of the major organizations across the country. So the repression actually woke us up more than we have actually thought. Something that, once again, should have happened so long ago, but is happening now, and something that we must recognize. So in addition to these two paradigms of power, something that we've been able to work towards in this last year, something important that we must all recognize is one very important kind of concept that I think grounds us all in this movement, is that we are not doing this for ourselves. We are not doing this for just our parents. We are not doing this just for our ancestors. We are doing this for the thousands of martyrs that have risked everything. And this is really a concept that we must understand at its core, that as the number of martyrs continues to double by the day, we here in the diaspora are scared to sacrifice, while they are putting everything on the line. And so I ask you to reflect about Hind Rajab, Rifat al-Arir, and the many more Palestinians that were on the front lines of the struggle in Gaza and all across Palestine. And think about the sacrifices that they have made, and think about the privileges that they have allowed us to experience. That while we are here in a safe shelter with no fear of bombs or missiles or tanks hitting into our cars or actually into ourselves, our biggest form of repression is actually the state itself.
Two gestures of solidarity with Palestine. One is in the Vatican from Pope Francis, and then on the right, a Jewish menorah within a Palestinian kafia. In a couple of weeks, exactly 1 year after the police killing of forest defender Tortuguita, a webinar about the Stop Cop City campaign. Save the date. Syria. The left in the U.S. is besotted with campism, only seeing the faults of the U.S. and making excuses for Assad, Russia, and Iran. About Syria, after Assad's demolition, most of the left jabbers on only about the dangers of the Islamists. In contrast, two Syrian women. The first is Wafa Mustafa.
For some reason, everyone manages to erase the agency of the Syrian people. No, Assad was also partially toppled because millions of Syrians fought against it, spoke out against it.
Let me read you a quote you gave. This was at a European conference on Syria. You said, "We've been here for 12 years. You've been exhausting our traumas. You've been exhausting our stories. And for what? Nothing has changed."
Yeah, and nothing has changed till today. The Assad regime was toppled, and the international community has nothing to do with it. They have zero influence in this. Assad was toppled not because they supported the Syrian people. And Assad was also not toppled only because of a military operation that started 2 weeks ago. Of course, we can talk about geopolitical context till tomorrow. And that, of course, plays a huge role. But for some reason, everyone manages to erase the agency of the Syrian people. No, Assad was also partially toppled because millions of Syrians fought against it, spoke out against it, paid their blood and their suffering and their souls for a moment of freedom for this country. In 2011, it was a war on terrorism. It was a conspiracy theory. So again, we were all the Syrians were stupid. They did not know what happened.
This was the Assad government's viewpoint. This is what they were saying.
Yeah, but it's also, I'm sorry, but this is also the anti-imperialists' tankies narrative around Syria. And then in 2012, suddenly they decided it's a proxy war. So again, it's not even about the Syrian people. It's about foreign powers. And of course, part of it is a proxy war. But I'm amazed by how all these narratives always manage to just erase the agency of the Syrian people, erase the struggle, the fight, and the sacrifices we made. And now suddenly, Assad has been toppled because of a military operation. That's not true. That's part of the truth. But it's not the complete truth. Assad was toppled because people like my father did not fear going to the streets knowing that they might be arrested and killed under torture. And if you ask millions of Syrians, they will say the same. In every interview I do now, they ask me, but do you trust HTS? What do you think about HTS? Are you hopeful about the future? Habibi, I don't have the luxury to be hopeful or be optimistic or be pessimistic. I go to the streets and I fight. That's it. That's what my father did, and that's what I want to do now. I cannot just sit in Berlin and say, I trust HTS. Of course I don't trust HTS. Of course I don't trust any military group, and I don't trust any government. And that's our duty. We pressure the government, we fight the government when it does not do its work. I don't expect to sit here and then find the perfect government that will give me the free, just democratic Syria. It does not work. If it worked like, if there is a chance that it will work like this, we would have not lost millions of people. It does not work like this. And I don't trust anyone, but I trust myself and I trust other Syrians.
People ask me all the time why so many people who are well known and have large platforms and have been correct and consistent in speaking out against Zionism, against genocide on Palestinians, and on the United States backing of this occupation and funding of this genocide. And they want to know why so many people in that space make excuses for Bashar al-Assad, support Bashar al-Assad, shit on Syrians all the time. And there is an easy answer. And that answer is that Arab dictators like Bashar al-Assad, Arab fascists, had this story that they told the world that Arab fascism was what was protecting and advocating for Palestinians, and that Israel was our only enemy. And if you can imagine what this is like for Palestinians to, be dispossessed, to lose your land, and also because decisions are made globally through you need a state to represent you as a person. So Palestinians didn't have state representation or status. And if you can imagine just being kicked around by not only the Zionist occupiers, but by the Arab fascists. And there are so many people who are Syrian Palestinian specifically who just went through so much gaslighting the past 14 years. And I just wanted to make this video to if you're wondering about this topic, I just want to let you know, I have friends who have been with me the entire time I was advocating for Syria and just could not wrap their minds around the extent of how deep a lot of these pro-Palestine influencers supported Bashar al-Assad until last week when they all then started saying stuff about Syria. It also is like, you know, when you put all your stock in some of these influencers to narrate the entire region for you, it means that if they choose to ignore Syria, that means you then ignore Syria. And then when you meet someone like me, you might have said to me in the past 14 years, I just don't get what you're saying. You are so complicated. And like, there's so many things in life that are complicated. Photosynthesis is really complicated. That doesn't mean it's unknowable. So I'm just making this video because I just want to like reassure and reaffirm that like your intuition is correct. No Arab fascism, no Zionism. And if you're in the US and have ties to the region or you care about the region, no Islamism and no Christian nationalism. And there are a lot of people who believe in all of those things. And I just want to encourage you to like keep doing your best, especially if you're in the United States, against Israel's genocide against Palestinians, because we fund that. And to keep looking for people with integrity, because there are a lot of people with integrity. They may not just have like one label that they introduce themselves to the world as.
And perhaps in a sign of things to come, some Egyptian youth tear down a poster of dictator Sisi. That's our program for today. See you in 25. I'm Stanley Heller for the Struggle Video News.